Today we are in Matthew chapter 27, verses 39 through 40, and then 45 through 54. Thomas, am I good back there? I forgot to get the thumbs up. Okay. I always forget to ask Thomas if he's ready. I'm supposed to wait for that. Okay, this morning I'll just go over those verses again. It's Matthew chapter 27, verses 39 through 40, and then 45 through 54. And we've got a lot of verses today, so I'm not going to read them all together. I'm just going to go through them individually today because I don't know if we will be starting a little bit earlier with preaching or not. So just as an introduction, it's talking about still the most amazing story. And you know, isn't the story of Jesus dying on the cross and being and then rising from the dead, isn't that just the most amazing story? You have all kinds of emotions there. Betrayal, injustice, courage, most of all love, the love that Jesus showed each person, each one of us. There's just so much in the story. I went last Sunday evening to see the story of Calvary at Bennett Baptist Church, and it was just so real, the way the whole story was portrayed. And I feel like just throughout the week then I've just been thinking about this whole Easter story kind of over and over, and it's just really been on my mind a lot, and especially I guess since I was reading and preparing the lesson, and since it's about Jesus as well, I've just really had the story on my mind this week. During the Easter season, we get a chance to listen to that story again, that as if it's our first time. Although, most of us, it's not our first time. We have heard it many times. But I think the older I get, the more I think about it so much more, I guess, and how much Jesus did for me. It's a story that's ever new, the story of how God made new life available to a lost and sinful humanity. So just looking back a little bit at the lesson context, we know that Peter, his confession of Jesus as the Christ, the Messiah, that had happened, and then Jesus had begun to warn his disciples of his coming death and his resurrection. He had told them these things, but they couldn't comprehend. I'm sure I'd have been the same way. I just couldn't have comprehended something like that. So then, a series of trials went on, and there was biased testimonies, and then Jesus was sentenced to death by crucifixion, which was a brutal execution. And the Roman authorities often used this type of punishment because it was a way that they could try to strike fear in the population. If you do bad, this is what's going to happen to you. You'll die a terrible death on a cross. So it was to try to keep people from doing wrong. But the condemned person was either tied or nailed to a wooden frame in a prominent place. And of course, they experienced blood loss. It was very hard for them to breathe, hanging in that position. Of course, and then there was public standing around, watching all this. And I can't even imagine being in that crowd. I think that was one thing that I noticed last week in watching that drama. All the people were out there, and they were watching that. I don't know how someone would want or even could stand to watch someone die like that, but that was the case back in that day. So as our lesson opens today, we find Jesus in this very state. He's there. He's on the cross, and we'll start with verse 39. Those who passed by hurled insults at him, shaking their heads. So we know that we can read about this story in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And then also there's a little bit that John says as well. So verse 40a, and saying, you who are going to destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself. So there was a lot of mockery going on. You know, well, Jesus, you said this or you said that. But the thing of it was they were misquoting him. They were not saying what he had said. They were getting it wrong. So Jesus was on record as promising to raise the temple in 3 days were it to be destroyed. But he was talking about his own body, his body as the temple. Jesus is not recorded as saying that he would destroy the temple in Jerusalem. Thus, the accusation, you who are going to destroy the temple, came from the lips of false witnesses. To speak against a temple back in that day was basically a death penalty. So kind of all of this got started just because some misquoted and didn't really get the full understanding of what Jesus meant. Verse 40b, come down from the cross if you are the Son of God. So it kind of made me think, and the commentary brings this out too, about when Satan tempted Jesus, and he would say, well, come down or whatever, come down off the mountain or that kind of thing, if you're the Son of God. But so this is kind of similar. So there were several that referred to Jesus as the Son of God. But it talks about that Jesus did not often refer to himself as the Son of God. He referred to himself as the Son of Man. And we read about that too, and it's in another chapter. Jesus could have come down from the cross if he had chosen to. But he chose to stay there and die for each of us. And it was such a sacrifice that he made. Verse 45, from noon until 3 p.m, darkness came over all the land. So this darkness was very unusual. It was in the afternoon. It wasn't a time that it should be dark. And so, someone could say, well, it was an eclipse. But the commentary explains that it really couldn't have been because this lasted for 3 hours. And an eclipse normally lasts for 15 minutes. It's that time when the moon moves between the earth and the sun. And that should only take about 15 minutes. But this was 3 hours of darkness. And it also talks about how normally it would be a new moon that would happen. And it wasn't a new moon, it was the full moon, because it was during, the crucifixion occurred during Passover at a full moon. So we know this darkness was supernatural. This was from God. Man could not do something like this. It also talks about how God is displeased with darkness, and it's written throughout the Bible about how darkness is bad, and a lot of bad things happen during the darkness and that kind of thing. But this was definitely orchestrated by God, and it was a direct reaction to those who had mocked Jesus. 46, about 3 p.m, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, Eloi, Eloi, lema sabachthani, which means, my God, why have you forsaken me? And it says that this was one of 7 cries by Jesus from the cross. The cry is in Aramaic, which is a later form of the Hebrew language. At this point, then, Jesus was enduring that separation from the cross, or the separation from his Father at this point. Verse 47, when some of those standing there heard this, they said, he's calling Elijah. And the commentary brings out that the reason they thought this is because he was using the word Eli, which was actually pronounced Elomi in the Aramaic language, but they were misunderstanding and kind of misconstruing things, and what he was really doing was calling out to God, his Father. Verse 48, immediately one of them ran and got a sponge. He filled it with wine vinegar and put it on a staff and offered it to Jesus to drink. So we don't know if this was a hostile action where, they were offering him vinegar, or if someone was actually maybe trying to help him. There's, some belief in that vinegar has some type of medicinal type properties, so maybe it was somebody that actually felt compassion for him and wanted to try to help him by giving him something. We really don't know. Verse 49, the rest said, now leave him alone. Let's see if Elijah comes to save him. So here was just a little bit of impatience going on by the bystanders and kind of waiting to, okay, well, let's see what's going to happen now. Verse 50, and when Jesus had cried out again in a loud voice, he gave up his spirit. The words Jesus cried out in a loud voice are recorded in Luke chapter 23, verse 46. Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. And then in John chapter 19, verse 30, he records that Jesus said, it is finished. And at that point, he died. This verse highlights two key aspects. First, Jesus maintained enough physical strength until his death that he could still shout. And I mean, you just think about everything his body has endured. He's already gone through a beating before he ever made it to the cross. And now he's hung on the cross and suffered this terrible death. And then the second part is that he remained in control of his life. So he was still able to speak until that very last second. Verse 51a, at that moment the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. And we've been studying about the Old Testament. Several of you have had lessons on it too, about the temple and how you had the, I want to make sure I say this right, the holy place, and then the curtain separated the holy place from the most holy place. So that curtain was very important, and we know that only the high priest could pass behind that curtain to enter the most holy place. And that was just once a year to offer the sacrificial blood on the Day of Atonement. So as the 3 hours of darkness were supernatural in origin, so was this tearing of the temple curtain from top to bottom. So there was a lot of things going on, things that were happening from God. They were things that humans could not do in any way. It talks about this curtain or the veil. I never realized this, but it said it's 3.5 to 4 inches thick. That is a thick piece of cloth, whatever it was. And it said that it took 300 priests to hang it. Just imagine how heavy that was. And all of a sudden, it just gets torn in two. I mean, that's something. Definitely from God. It's not something that a human could do, or several humans, or 100 humans even. 51b, the earth shook, the rocks split. So it's kind of like an earthquake. This was major. I think it would have been so scary. They must have thought, what is going on here? This is not normal at all. Verse 52 and 53, and the tombs broke open. The bodies of many holy people who had died were raised to life. They came out of the tombs after Jesus' resurrection and went into the holy city and appeared to many people. So this is pretty amazing too, that actually there were other people that were raising from the dead. The people that were living during that time, they must have been so confused and just really like what is going on? And it talks about the holy city. That holy city is Jerusalem. That's what they were talking about. And it says that the people did not really come out until after Jesus' resurrection. That's when that piece of it happened. In verse 54, when the centurion and those with him were guarding Jesus saw the earthquake and all that had happened, they were terrified and exclaimed, "Surely he was the Son of God." So just a little background here. A centurion was a Roman soldier, and he commanded a unit known as a century in a legion of the Roman army. And each century consisted of about 80 men. And this centurion was probably the one that was in charge of the crucifixion. So he had been there. He had watched this whole thing take place. He had actually been part of it, you know. And this is what he said: "Surely he was the Son of God." That stems from his fear-driven response to the supernatural occurrences around him. Jesus' disciples had a similar response when Jesus walked on water and calmed the storm. So, you know, they had been around Jesus enough that they had seen a lot of his miracles. And, it was just amazing the different times to see that what Jesus did. And now in verse 1, we're in now Matthew 28, verse 1. After the Sabbath at dawn on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to look at the tomb. So it just reminds us about the days and how they were calculated back then. So it went from sunset to sunset. And they couldn't do anything on the Sabbath. So they wouldn't have gone on Saturday. But it was that Sunday morning, because Sunday back then was like the first day of the week. Saturday was the Sabbath, and Sunday was the first day. So they had gone that first day, then they wanted to go to the tomb, and they were going to anoint Jesus' body. So it talks about Mary Magdalene and the other Mary. It says there were other women too, but Matthew doesn't really talk about the other women. It says that he probably talked about these two Marys because they had been part of Jesus' ministry back from his earlier ministry. We know that Mary Magdalene was the one, he had delivered her from demon possession some many years ago. And of course she was so thankful that he had delivered her from those demons. And it says the other Mary was the mother of James and Joseph and could have been the wife of Clopas. So by the evil initiative of the Jewish leaders and the compassion of Joseph of Arimathea, Jesus' body was not left as long on the cross. Joseph had provided the tomb, and the two women named Mary were eyewitnesses to the interment. Because the Sabbath would begin a short time after Jesus' death, his body could not be properly prepared for burial without violating the commandment not to work on the Sabbath. Verse 2, there was a violent earthquake, for an angel of the Lord came down from heaven and, going to the tomb, rolled back the stone and sat on it. Again, an earthquake signaled divine action, given the results we see here. So an angel came down and rolled the stone away. Of course, Jesus didn't need to have the stone rolled away. That was more for the people to be able to walk inside and see that the tomb was empty. Jesus could come out with he was going to come out. He was the Son of God. He was going to come out whether the door was open or not, basically. Verse 3, his appearance was like lightning, and his clothes were white as snow. So, this was probably alarming too. The guards were so afraid of him that they shook and became like dead men. The Roman governor Pilate had agreed to set a guard. He had a guard, or maybe two guards, there at the tomb, because he didn't want anyone to say, well, or he didn't want the disciples to be able to go and take Jesus out of the tomb and then say that he had risen or something, or anyway, he just didn't want anything of the sort to happen. So he was going to make sure that that tomb was guarded. But the guards, it says they fell over like dead men. It was very, I'm sure, just amazing to them, and very, very scary. Verse 5 and 6a, the angel said to the women, "Do not be afraid, for I know that you are looking for Jesus who was crucified. He is not here. He has risen, just as he said." So the angel, of course, was trying to comfort the women and just give them peace, that everything was okay, that Jesus had raised from the dead. Verse 6b, come and see the place where he lay. So it's, if you think about we're in past tense. That's where Jesus lay in the past. He's not there anymore. He has risen, and it now becomes a much happier scene. We finally have, the happiness to the Easter story, because Jesus now has risen, and where he lay is vacant. Verse 7, then go quickly and tell his disciples, he has risen from the dead and is going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him. Now I have told you. So, the disciples kind of abandoned Jesus in the garden. They were scared, but they were to be the first whom the women were to tell of his resurrection. Jesus knew they were going to fail, but he still loved them. Just like he still loves us, even though we fail. But he loves us, and he's always there for us. And he's promised now to meet them afterwards in Galilee. Verse 8, so the women hurried away from the tomb, afraid yet filled with joy, and ran to tell his disciples. So I can't even imagine what they were feeling. They probably thought, will people believe us? Jesus died on the cross. Will people believe us that he actually rose from the dead? I'm sure they had a lot of emotions. It even talks about in our commentary about just different emotions that we have all the time. Very powerful emotions. But the good thing about the women is they went. They did what they were told. They didn't let maybe their emotions of fear or sadness or anything stand in the way. They went and did as the angel told them to. Verse 9, suddenly Jesus met them. Greetings, he said. They came to him, clasped his feet, and worshiped him. So as the women were on their way to tell the disciples, they actually see Jesus. And immediately they knew it was Jesus, and they fell to the ground and worshiped him and just bowed to him. Verse 10, then Jesus said to them, do not be afraid. Go and tell my brothers to go to Galilee. There they will see me. Here, Jesus, again, just reminds them, just as the angel said, go ahead, go tell the disciples. And he had that enduring love for his disciples. They had been with him through so much. And I know that he was just going to be so excited to actually be able to see them and prove to them, I did what I said I would do. I told you I would rise again, and I've done exactly what I said. And, he continued to refer to them as his brothers. He says, go and tell my brothers. He did feel like they were his brothers. They've been through so much. In conclusion, the grind of daily life can distract us from most profound truths. We humans tend to allow the urgent to take priority over the important. And sometimes it's hard to know, isn't it? It's kind of hard to know what's important. Some things maybe stand in the way of other things that we want to do or that we feel that we need to do. Christians must continually remind themselves of the importance of what God has done. By repetition, we remember. In remembering, we restore the eyesight of faith to its proper and primary focus. Against every expectation, but in accord with every divine promise, Jesus died and rose from the dead. Let's hold the glorious amazement of those events in our hearts daily and forever. Would anyone like to add anything?
They're mourning like any other family would, and you have to think, did they remember he said he was coming back? Did they say, is this it? Is that it? No more? But then when they realized that tomb was empty, they realized everything he said was true, and how important it was to tell other people that. I think that's just amazing what
I do too.
they got to witness.
Yes, it was truly amazing. And I'm sure, at first they were probably skeptical of what the angel told them. Well, the tomb is empty, but I don't see, yes. Right, they could have thought Jesus was stolen. I mean, I'm sure just all these emotions went through their minds. I'm sure it was just quite a time. The whole 3 days, it was just unbelievable, I'm sure. To have been there during that time. And even just looking back, I was just amazed too, like in the drama where all the people were standing around and they were saying, crucify him, crucify him. I'm just thinking, that is such a horrible death to put on someone. And they really didn't have evidence. There was no evidence. It was just hearsay. It was just people, say, well, he said this or he said that, but there was just no evidence. But I guess in looking back, then we know why it had to happen. Something had to happen, and this was Jesus, taking the sins of the world away. So. It's just like in the opening, it talks about, it's quite a story. And just even your best story, your best movie, the best movie you ever watched, it really can't compare to this story that just had so many emotions, so much everything in it, just so much that you really, it just really makes you think about what Jesus went through for each of us. But I hope you all have a great week. Stay safe, and I think the bell will be probably ringing in just a few minutes.